Rink-wide Vancouver, part of our summer series. Been a minute since we've done one of these, Irv, but yeah, look, we thought we should get the band back together here and wrap up the month of July. It has been a couple of weeks since you and I have recorded. I know you've been busy working with Sakaris on Sakaris and Price and other shows, but this is Rink-wide, and we didn't want to leave the audience hanging for too long, so we thought let's get back together here and sum up what turned out to be a pretty busy month for the Vancouver Canucks. So we'll jump right into that in a sec here. Rink-wide, a presentation of the Vancouver Canadians, who are back at the net this week from July 30th through the end of August. The Seas have 18 games in the glorious summer weather here in Vancouver. Fireworks extravaganzas on Thursday nights, nooners on Fridays, which are a great reason to pack up and leave work a little early on a Friday. Family fun Sundays as well. Games are sure to be packed, so get your tickets early. Do not wait. Call 604-872-5232 or go to CanadiansBaseball.com. Before we jump into Canucks talk, how's summer going?
Well, really good. You were away last week. How was that?
I was. Wife and I snuck away to Napa Valley, which was terrific. It's been about 20 years since I've been down there. Great area. I just love it because the flight to San Fran is so easy, right? Like, it's less than 2 hours in the air. In fact, the drive from San Francisco airport to our place in Sonoma, probably longer than the actual flight itself. But no, it was good. Took the golf clubs, got out, drank a little wine, played some golf. I went to a baseball game on Friday night, the Giants and the Colorado Rockies at Oracle Park. The Rockies are terrible. I knew that going in. The Giants aren't a whole lot better this year. So, like, no vested interest. Like, I just wanted to see a ball game in that ballpark. I'd driven past it a bunch, but, I didn't go in there. I'm not a big San Francisco Giants fan. I just want to be entertained, right? Like, I don't care who's on the mound. I just want to see some things. Well, we saw some things. 3 innings into that game, 2 home runs and 2 triples. So they were all by the Giants. Giants absolutely clobbered the Rockies that night. So, it was good, but it was cold. Final week of July, and people warned me, if you're going to a Giants game, like, take jackets and what. Yeah, except like during the day in Sonoma, it was in the mid to high 30s. I didn't pack a lot in the way of heavy equipment for like a night out of the ballpark. So my wife and I had to stop at the mall on the way to the baseball game to actually buy outer layers to get us through the night. So live and learn if you're going to a game in San Francisco, even in the middle of summer. Like, it probably got down to 13 or 14 degrees, and then the wind on the water there. So didn't spoil the night. It was still fun. And good road trip. So, but back at it and back with you here.
Yep.
And as we've done, we did a couple of these shows right out of free agency. So we summed up the main activity for the Vancouver Canucks in those days, first couple of days of July. But since then, there have been a couple of things that you and I haven't discussed. And certainly the most notable is the addition of Daniel Sprong. And I have to admit that, look, I thought they were done. There was that little sliver of salary cap space, and I thought they were going to sit on it. But I was wrong, and I'll admit it. They go in for Daniel Sprong, 1-year deal, $975. This is a curious guy. And I know a fair bit's been made of it, but again, we haven't had a chance to talk about him here on Rink-wide. Just turned 27 in March, so they're going to get him for his 27-year-old year, right shot, primarily a right winger, although I think there's a little bit of versatility there. And the guy can score goals, but as we know in the National Hockey League, goal scorers generally get paid. And for whatever reason, this guy has yet to really, truly cash in, and we'll see what he can do with the opportunity here in Vancouver. But when you look at his track record, drafted by this management group when he was in Pittsburgh, but didn't start scoring goals in the National Hockey League until he moved to Anaheim. 14 goals with the Ducks, 13 with Washington. He had 21 with Seattle a couple of years ago and 18 goals last year in Detroit, back-to-back seasons of 40-plus points. So the offense is there, but he hasn't been able, for whatever reason, to translate that into any sort of term or significant dollars. I think he made $2 million in Seattle one year, but that was the high for him. So he is an interesting study in that regard, is that he continues to produce, but hasn't been able to hit the home run, if we go back to baseball, when it comes to contracts.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the play in his own end. Also, you hear things around the National Hockey League. He's played on a bunch of different teams in a very short period of time, so is the reputation. But, I mean, the Canucks believe in him, right? You mentioned drafted by this management group. Rick Talket, had a very good conversation with him. I really do believe that he and his staff think that, they can work with him and they can get him to a player that, is able to produce at a maximum level. Also, he's 27 years old, will be 28 next season. He's in a contract year, a big contract year. And I think the biggest thing for him and the low money, it's low risk, but the reward could be pretty high, Jeff. If you look at the potential of who he might be able to play with, like versatile guy that can move up and down the lineup. You go on, dailyfaceoff.com. We have our projections there of who they think plays in what position. Right now, Jake DeBrusk, Elias Pettersson, and Daniel Sprong is the Canucks' second line. I mean, it could be a pretty good second line. You mentioned, him playing on the right wing, but can play on the other side as well. But where would you slot him into that lineup? Do you give him the opportunity to go play up in the lineup, or is he going to be buried somewhere in that bottom six forward group?
Well, and look, I've had a little bit of time to think about this, and if they give him a shot with Pettersson and DeBrusk, I'm fine with that. This guy's got a killer shot. But look, Elias Pettersson, you'd think would want to have a bounce back to the way that his season finished. Jake DeBrusk is going to want to show that he's worth this contract. Is there enough puck to go around for all these guys to be as productive as they want to be? I guess we'll find out. Only one guy can score at any one time. On the surface, I find it hard to believe that a guy who is still available in free agency 3 weeks after the window opened can be the answer in the top six. But if he is, that's 2 years in a row that the Vancouver Canucks have turned a guy that was sitting there waiting for a contract into a top six player. Now, P.S. Suter may not be in the top six this time around, but last year, that's ultimately where he slotted with JT Miller and Brock Besser. So Rick Talket's big on his duos. There's nothing that says that, that trio that we mentioned would start the season and stay that way. But I'm not going to be shocked if Sprong gets an opportunity in that position. But then, of course, it begs the question, how does that impact others? And they've got a lot of wingers. Without a doubt, when you look at who the Vancouver Canucks have at the wing position, Brock Besser, Jake DeBrusk, Connor Garland, Dakota Joshua, Danton Heinen, Kiefer Sherwood, those guys all seem like for sure's in the lineup on a nightly basis when they're healthy. Then you get Phil DiGiuseppe, Nils Aman, Nils Höglander, Vasily Podkolzin wants in on all of that. That's 10 guys right there without Sprong. So we're talking about 11 wingers for 8 slots. And, it's a competitive business. We understand that. And there's no promises or guarantees given to guys like Aman or PDG. They've got to earn their spot. Same with Podkolzin. And the Canucks clearly felt that at under $1 million, this was an opportunity to continue to bolster their roster. So, we saw what Höglander did. Obviously got off to a great start lower in the lineup, earned a promotion, and continued to score when he played higher in the lineup. But then the playoffs came around and he was a healthy scratch at one point. So I think we all kind of feel that Nils Höglander is still in a, he's on his third NHL coach, but still in that proving ground where there are areas of his game that he has to shore up if he's going to be a regular, and it's a contract year for him as well. So, again, there's a little heat on there. Sprong's fascinating to me because while he does score goals in limited roles, it's not like he's been an absolute, power play monster. Most of his scoring has come 5-on-5. Now there's been some talk about, well, he'll probably get some power play opportunity here. Maybe he will. I can't imagine as a right shot guy. We saw last year, they ran through the gamut of right shot guys on that top unit. It didn't work out so well. I think Jake DeBrusk is going to get the first opportunity on power play one.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But then, if you can have a guy like Sprong, and you could have Garland, and you could have Philip Hronek and Dakota Joshua, or, I think the makings are there. Not that the second unit gets a ton of time, but just looking at Daniel Sprong's career, he's got 14 power play goals in the National Hockey League. 6 of them came in Seattle 2 years ago, so almost half his power play production came in one season with the Kraken. But this isn't a guy that's absolutely lights out on the power play. So, it'll be interesting to see kind of where he slots in there as well. You mentioned the discussion that he had with Rick Talket. He talked about it as well. I wasn't on the Zoom, but I certainly saw the quotes, and it really sounded like Rick Talket convinced, or at least, if his mind wasn't made up, then that was the topper. And he decided after talking to Talket that, this is where he wants to be here in Vancouver. But I loved the 2 questions that Talket asked of Daniel Sprong. And one was what, we talked about a little bit there. Why haven't you stayed in one place? Why hasn't there been that fit in any of these places you've played? And the other one was, why don't you play late in games? And from a coaching perspective, I think that's important because that goes back to some of the things you said as well. Like, there's two ends of the ice. It's like we can focus on all of his production. And yeah, this guy scores goals. But if he scores a goal, but is on the ice for goals against at the same rate, then what's he accomplishing there? So certainly there are some defensive deficiencies that he's got to shore up. And I think Talket kind of used Brock Besser as an example as a guy that came into the league, got his, but wasn't a guy that coaches trusted late in games to, see victories through. I don't know that Daniel Sprong is going to ever become that guy. Yeah. But from a coaching perspective, it's an interesting question at the very least. And I thought that was kind of cool that that's how Rick Talket looks at this player, not what can you do for me offensively? It's like, why wouldn't other coaches use you in close games as time's winding down? And it's pretty obvious that they saw things in his game that, just didn't allow them to feel comfortable putting him out there trying to preserve leads.
Well, it goes without saying there's another guy in his lineup that has 24 goals that he couldn't play he had to scratch in the postseason, and that's Nils Höglander. Look, I think this is part of a bigger picture to me, to be honest. Like you mentioned the fact that they've got a lot of wingers now. They've got a lot of young wingers. Those are assets. If the Canucks want to try and make a move, maybe to try and get a top 4 defenseman, are they going to package some of these young guys to hopefully make that move? Whether that happens before the training camp or, at some point this season, I think that that's definitely something that's in the back of their minds. But it's low risk and hopefully for them, high reward. I think he's going to be given the opportunity. You look at, the teams that he's played with, he hasn't played much, but he does continue to produce. And I think that that's a big thing that the Canucks look at. If you can give him some opportunity with maybe Elias Pettersson and Jake DeBrusk, or if he can, find some chemistry with another lineup or another set of wingers or another set a line there, then maybe they can, do some damage. But it's going to be interesting to see the way that Rick Talket wants to put his lines together and then what he actually does on opening night, because there's a difference of what we see in day 1 of training camp, Jeff. You and I know this, covered it for a long time, and what you see in game 1 and then game 55 and game 82 and game 1 of the playoffs. Everything is going to be different. It's all, open for interpretation. But the way it looks right now, like that's a pretty deep forward group. And You mentioned the depth of, 11 wingers for 8 spots. Like it doesn't look too bad in Canucks land for that forward group.
No, and I think one of the downfalls, obviously, for this hockey club down the stretch and into the playoffs was the lack of finish. And Elias Pettersson struggled to score himself, but also to make the guys around him better. But you do wonder, like, if Ilya Mikheyev could have finished even a couple of his chances. It wasn't that Mikheyev wasn't getting chances; he just had no finish, and ended up joking about how many times he drilled pucks right into the logo of goaltenders. Well, now if the Canucks do roll out DeBrusk on one side and Sprong on the other, like you've got two guys that have the potential to finish at a much better rate than Ilya Mikheyev did. And so some of those chances, instead of hitting the goalie square in the crest, like maybe they find a corner, maybe they, find a 5-hole, maybe they find their way in. And the margins were so thin. Do a game 7, obviously, against the Oilers, 1-goal loss, goal here, goal there, could have made a difference. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Like on paper now, there is absolutely depth, but also, as you said, a surplus that, we'll see. What kind of trade value would a Vasily Podkolzin have right here, right now? Probably not a ton, but I do wonder, in a contract year too, like if Höglander was to back up the year that he had.
Yeah.
We talk about goal scorers wanting to get paid. If he could back up last season, then he's going to help the Vancouver Canucks. But at that point, if he can have consecutive years where he looks like a legitimate goal scoring threat, then there's probably some interest around the National Hockey League. And maybe at that point, that's a decision that the Vancouver Canucks have to make. And you hope that Podkolzin can sort of take the steps that Höglander did last year. Really going to be interesting to see. It was going to be interesting to see Podkolzin at training camp to begin with, but then with what the Canucks did on July 1st and now adding a guy like Daniel Sprong, you just wonder, like, where does this guy slot in? Is there room for him? He requires waivers now, so it really is kind of now or never for Vasily Podkolzin, and we're going to have to see how that all shakes out. So that's going to be interesting to watch, as will a lot of those battles in training camp. And you're so right, Irf. Like, in a market like this one, like we get locked on first day of training camp last year in Victoria. Hoglander was playing with Pettersson. Podkolzin was, he was out there with Miller, and it was like, wow. And of course, by the end of training camp, those things have moved on, and different guys are getting opportunities. And so I do think that it's going to be a little bit of a work in progress in that regard. And with where this team is, it's not about what happens in September. It's not really what happens in October or November. It's all building towards later in the season and trying to get it right come playoff time. It's fascinating. I was just looking at that 2015 draft that Sprong was a part of. He's a second rounder. We mentioned picked by Pittsburgh. And look, every draft produces second rounders, but that 2015 class, Sebastian Aho, the good one, the one from Carolina, Vince Dunn, Brandon Carlo, Rope Hintz, Rasmus Anderson, Eric Chernak, all second rounders along with Daniel Sprong. The Canucks didn't have a second rounder that year. They got Besser in the first round and Guillaume Brisebois in the third. So, Daniel Sprong decides that this is where he wants to play, and we'll see what he does with the opportunity to play for Rick Talket and the Vancouver Canucks next season. All right. So really that was the last move that the Canucks have made. I do think that they are fully into the dog days now. In some ways, it's hard to believe. Like, we're recording this in the last couple of days of July. I don't know. It feels like a lifetime ago since they signed Jake DeBrusk and Danton Heinen and all those guys on July the 1st. The other thing, since you and I have done a show here, was that they got a deal done with Arturs Silovs. And I don't know about you, but I was surprised. I was surprised at the dollar figure. I know he had no leverage. Restricted free agent without arbitration rights. But to get Arturs Silovs for 2 years at $850, and really it's 2 years at $800,000 with $100,000 signing bonus. So there's not even a raise in year number 2 for a guy that, got them to Game 7 of the second round of the Stanley Cup final. Like, I was sure that 10 playoff games on his resume, he's played more playoff hockey than Thatcher Demko has, which is wild to think about in his career. And I don't know. I just thought that alone, the playoff pedigree, brief as it is, was going to be enough to drag him into, $1 million in the second year of his contract. So the Vancouver Canucks, moving forward this year and next, look like they have their goaltending set up at under $6 million. So they've got to take advantage of that.
No, I think that, and I think for a guy like Arturs Silovs, you just mentioned, right? Not much leverage, no leverage, in fact, at all. Yeah, he played really, really well for the Vancouver Canucks, got them to Game 7 of the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But beyond that, the regular season, he came in and, showed signs of being able to do that. And I think it's the consistency. I think it's the longevity of it. Can you be a backup and play 50 or 33 games or whatever it is, or whatever the number is going to be for him? And look, he's a young kid, right? I mean, $800,000 is $800,000. It's a lot of money. I don't think that he was, going to his agent and they were going to Patrick Allvin saying, we want $1 million. We want 1.1. This is what we've done for you. We're this, we're that. I don't think that was the case. I think that, he knew the opportunity that he was going to have. There's no doubt in my mind that they went and tried to look for a veteran backup goalie and they weren't able to find one. And Arturs Silovs was there waiting. And now what you're going to have. And you just mentioned basically under $6 million for the next couple of seasons is pretty good work if you can get those two to play at an elite level. I mean, we saw what Silovs did in the postseason, and Demko was a Vezina nominee. So I think when you have that and you combine the biggest thing, health of the two goaltenders, if they can stay healthy, and the big if is obviously Thatcher Demko, but if those two can stay healthy throughout this entire season, and possibly when, Demko goes away to the Four Nations, it's all for April. It's all for April, May, and June if the Canucks end up getting that far.
Yeah, and I think, too, when you look at it, it's going to be wild to watch your Silovs and Demko each under contract for 2 years. So these next 24 months for the Vancouver Canucks, we'll watch the development and the growth of Silovs. I still think there's room for Demko to grow, but for him, it's staying healthy. That is absolutely priority number one. But, we'll see where they are a year from now. Ultimately, we'll see where they are 2 years from now. But in the here and now, certainly the Vancouver Canucks look like they are set, and they look pretty damn solid in the goaltending position. So, again, I think they want to believe that that's an area that they're going to have an advantage on most of their opponents almost every night out.
I have a question for you because you go to every practice. We're at every practice, watching every game if we can. Jim Rutherford did that interview with John Shannon on his podcast about the workload and calming the workload, or maybe slowing the workload down for a guy like Thatcher Demko. So what is that? Is that just him being off the ice completely? Because we know he likes getting his reps in, and we know that they do have a third goalie up here for practices, so he doesn't have to take practices or play in those practices. But what is that workload and managing that?
Well, it's funny, and I think this is important for people to understand that, yes, they've got this third practice goaltender, Roman Bazran, and he was around an awful lot, but I actually didn't think they used him enough. And I don't know if that was Thatcher Demko sort of waving him off and saying, forget it, like I'm staying out for practices. But I do think that they're going to have to chase him off the ice, get his work in with Ian Clark before practice, and then say, look, go watch video, do some work at the gym, whatever, but you're taking this practice entirely off. And I didn't think they did enough of that with Thatcher Demko, but these guys are creatures of habit. They're hockey players. They want to play. And so, on one hand, you command a guy that's that driven and that focused, but I think Thatcher has to understand too what he means to this hockey club and where he means the most to this hockey club. And it's not being healthy in November and December. It's being there ready to go every other night for a long stretch in April and May and, hopefully into June. So every year is a bit of a learning opportunity, and I'll be interested to see what Thatcher Demko learned about himself and his workload and his approach to all that kind of stuff. But I do think that the hockey club may have to be a little more stringent with him when it comes to, laying down the law and just telling him, nope, it's an off day for you. If it means scheduling them so that he knows, a week in advance that this is a day that we want you to take fully off. There's got to be a way. And Ian Clark's a smart guy. He's among the best in the business at what he does. And I know he's got a solid working relationship with Thatcher Demko. They have to maximize all of that, though, to ensure that Thatcher Demko stays healthy. They've got a backup that they should trust here. There's one that he's got to develop and got to get his games in as well. So, yeah, goaltending is always interesting to watch, but I think there are a lot of storylines this year, not just around the games and the games played and the numbers there, but also the approach to practice. And, yeah, we can talk about practice, but when it comes to Thatcher Demko, it is significant, and it's all part of his workload. All right. You mentioned Four Nations. I want to get there in a sec, but are you watching the Olympics? I assume you're watching the Olympics.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's fun. Get up in the morning and it's on weird times. And then by the time the afternoon rolls around, it's just replay. So you have to get in your mind that it's not actually live. But yeah, there's been some fascinating events. Obviously, the summer McIntosh has been amazing to watch. Katie Ledecky absolutely destroyed her competition. Like she was swimming in the opposite direction of one of the 1500 meter. I think I was watching that earlier. But it's been fun to watch, and there's a lot of cool events. I think breaking is now breakdancing is going to be an event. But Olympics are always fun to watch, Jeff. I think that's one of the things, we as a country, you gravitate towards these athletes and you see the work that they've put in to get to this point. And like, there's so much excitement and there's so much hype and there's so much buildup for every 4 years. So it's definitely fun to watch.
And we're just getting started. Only a couple of days in as we record this. So really 2 weeks. And that to me is one of the favorite parts. And it's kind of like the British Open. It's like Wimbledon and the French Open as well. Like you wake up, if you're an early riser, there's, like you're guaranteed there's something on the tube right away to, kind of fill the morning void. And I know both you and I are going to be keeping a pretty close eye on golf when it gets going here. So what do we got in the way of lines for men's golf at the Olympics?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many different things that you can look at, but I'm for purposes of this, I'm definitely going to go for top Canadian on our Bet365. Basically, our segment here brought to you by Bet365. Proud partners to Garrison Price, Canucks Conversation, Rink-wide Vancouver. Open account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use the code VANBONUS when you sign up. I'm going Nick Taylor. I know he's been up and down, kind of down lately, but I think, taking in the sights at the Olympics, I think just being there amongst all the athletes and kind of going about your business and doing your thing, it's going to be a different feel for a guy like Nick Taylor. I'm going at him at plus 225 to be the top Canadian. Don't win. Don't have to finish in the top 10 of the tournament, but finish as the top Canadian. I definitely do think there's some good odds there. And, you look at the other guys that, he's competing with and obviously competing against, it sure is going to be fun to watch.
I'm hoping that the Four Nations Faceoff is going to be fun to watch as well. As I watch these Olympic competitions and the best of the best, it kind of got me thinking that, we're just over 6 months away now from the Four Nations face-off. We know that Quinn Hughes is going to be there representing Team USA. I would have to think that JT Miller will be a part of that. Thatcher Demko, you touched on him, where he falls on that depth chart, probably behind Connor Hellebuck, but I do think that Demko is going to be part of the American team. Elias Pettersson wasn't one of the first 6 for the Swedes, but he'll be part of that team as well. So the Canucks are going to be well represented there. As we sit 6 months out from the Four Nations face-off, I know there's not going to be an opening ceremony where they're in boats going down the river. There won't be an opening ceremony at all, I don't think. But, where's your interest level? Do you think that there is going to be massive buy-in from fans in general for best on best, even if it is just 4 countries?
I do. I do. I think it's interesting because you just look at the talent level on every single team. It's the best players in the best league playing for their country, going against the best players in the best league playing for their country, And I think for certain countries, it means more. For Canada, 100% it means more. For the Americans, they're just stacked and they go up and they play Canada and you beat Canada. It's bragging rights for the rest of the regular season and beyond that. Teams like Sweden, you look at that, okay, can we go and compete against these other guys where they've shown in the past that they have? And the Finns are going to be a really, really good, solid team too, right? A lot of depth on that team, a lot of firepower and Stanley Cup champions as well on that team. But for me, it's Canada and USA, right? I think that you look at the Canadians, I think that when you put on that maple leaf and when you represent your country, just like we talked about at the Olympics, it just means so much more, I really do think, for the Canadians than it does for other countries, especially when it comes to hockey. But you can't count out the US anymore. They're breeding hockey players left, right, and center. So when you look at it, you guys, Austin Matthews, you mentioned Quinn Hughes, you mentioned Jack Hughes is going to be on that team. Jack Eichel, the team is going to be stacked. They probably have, I'm going to say it, their goaltending is definitely going to be better than Team Canada's on paper. It's just going to happen. We know it's obviously going to see what happens in those games. So I do believe there's going to be excitement. I think for any player that's going to go and is going to represent their country, once they put on those colors, it's full systems go, and it's going to be intense.
And it is kind of funny. You're right. In a small tournament, short form like this one, but both Sweden and Finland, I think, are going to play the underdog role, if you will, because not only will fans in Canada and the U.S. hope that that's the gold medal matchup or the final matchup, but I think those teams, you're right. And it'll be one of those rare times where Canada probably goes in as a little bit of an underdog as well. And we don't fully know what the rosters are going to be and who's going to be the starting goaltender for Canada. That's going to be the focus of a fair bit of discussion as this season unfolds. But yeah, I'm with you. We've been clamoring for best on best for such a long time. And, it's unfortunate with some of the world events that we can't have what we used to have with the bigger form tournaments, but take what you can get here. We'll see. And again, there's 6 months out, but just watching the Olympics got me thinking about, I hope this goes the way that the hockey world hopes it does as well. And that is that, you just put that much talent together, even if it is 4 countries, it should produce some incredible games and some great storylines as well. So looking forward to all of that. The Four Nations face-off, just our discussion about it, a presentation of Four Winds Brewing, family owned and operated out in Delta. Check out the Four Winds Brewing tap room and kitchen. It's located in the Tilbury area, serving beers, burgers, and their famous tacos every day from 11 a.m. until 8 p.m. Four Winds Brewing, also home to the Four Winds Light Lager, a crisp, clean, and easy drinking beer. A beer for everybody, a beer that's perfect before, after, or during the game. Four Winds Light Lager, ask for it at your local liquor store or have some delivered right to your door through the online shop at fourwindsbrewing.ca. All right, I think that's going to do it. Just a little brief wrap-up of what we have missed here as the world has continued to turn, even though we haven't been doing rink-wide, but we'll continue to pop up. So a reminder to subscribe here on our YouTube channel. You don't want to miss any episodes. So if you subscribe, if you follow us on our social channels, you will know exactly when Irf and I have been hard at work pumping out the content. In the meantime, Sakaris and Price, you mentioned they're going through the summer, so you can get their thoughts on the Olympics and any Canuck news that happens. Canucks Convo as well, down to a reduced schedule, but those boys are still doing their thing as well. So a lot going on here at the Nation Network, and The countdown is on as we get ready to flip the calendar. Not that people still flip calendars, but as we get ready to move into August, hey, you get to August and you can say next month. Like, that's how close we are to hockey season, young stars and training camp and all that kind of stuff. So the countdown, even the Canucks I see on their socials counting down the days to opening night, and opening night obviously isn't until October, but they got through the 80s. I think they're down to like Jake DeBrusk's number 74. So that. Countdown is on. We're getting there. Cruising through the summer months and getting ready for the start of a new hockey season. So we'll continue to do this here. Find some things. There's never a shortage of things to talk about. That's the beauty of a market like Vancouver. But Irf, good to get back at it with you here.
Absolutely.
We'll fire up the podcasting machine in the weeks ahead here as well. Thanks so much to Jacob and Mike working hard behind the scenes for us. As always, for Irf, I'm Jeff. Thanks for checking out this summer episode of Rink Wide Vancouver.
Thanks for watching this video. For more great content from Canucks Army, check out Sakaris and Price, Rink Wide Vancouver, or our show, Canucks Conversation. We're your one-stop shop for interviews, breaking news, and a live Canucks postgame show hosted by Jeff Patterson.